The Boys is a dark satire about a world where superheroes are real but are corrupted by celebrity, corporate power, and politics, turning heroism into a dangerous product. The show's real subject is power once it learns how to sell itself. That is what makes The Boys different from a normal superhero parody. It is not only saying superheroes would be corrupt if they existed. That part is easy. The deeper point is that their corruption would not have to hide. It would be packaged, defended, rebranded, litigated, and sold back to the public as inspiration. Vought does not need its heroes to be good people. It needs them to be profitable symbols. Once that is understood, almost everything in the show makes sense. The first season begins with Huey Campbell, an ordinary man with an ordinary life, watching his girlfriend Robin get killed by A Train. She is not murdered in a personal way. She is erased by accident. A Train is running too fast, high on Compound V, and he blows through her body in the middle of the street. Huey is left holding her hands, and the company response is not grief or justice. It is settlement money and silence. That is the first honest statement the show makes. In a world run by Vought, suffering only matters when it threatens the brand. Robin's death is not treated as a human tragedy by the people responsible. It is treated as a public relations problem. Huey is expected to accept money, sign a document, and disappear back into normal life. Then Billy Butcher appears. Butcher gives Huey a direction for his grief. He tells him the heroes are not heroes, that Vought is covering up crimes, and that people like A Train need to be fought because the official system will never punish them properly. At first, Butcher seems like the man brave enough to say the truth. He is angry, direct, and unafraid of Supes, but the show is careful with him from the beginning. Butcher is not simply a hero on the other side of the corruption. He is a man whose hatred has become his identity. That matters because The Boys is not only about bad, powerful people. It is also about what happens to powerless people after they are damaged by bad, powerful people. Some look for justice. Some look for revenge. Some cannot tell the difference anymore. Huey joins Butcher, Mother's Milk, Frenchie, and Kimiko in the fight against Vought. Each member of the group has been damaged by Supes or by the systems around them. MM's family history is tied to Soldier Boy. Frenchie carries guilt from his past and tries to find meaning in protecting people. Kimiko was turned into a weapon and spends the show trying to recover personhood from a world that only ever used her body. The Boys are not clean heroes. They are traumatized people fighting a company that has made trauma profitable. On the other side is the Seven, Vought's most valuable superhero team. They are presented like a mix of the Justice League, a boy band, and a weapons program. The public sees them as icons. Inside the tower, they are insecure, cruel, damaged, bored, and controlled by contracts. Starlight enters the Seven believing in the image. Annie January actually wanted to be a hero. She grew up believing the speeches, the costumes, the idea that power should be used to help people. Her first real experience inside the Seven is humiliation and abuse from the deep. That moment is important because it breaks the fantasy immediately. Vought's world is not rotten around the edges. It is rotten at the point where the dream begins. Annie's arc is one of the most important in the show because she does not begin as cynical. She becomes disillusioned, but she does not become empty. She sees the brand from the inside and realizes that heroism has been turned into content. Interviews, costumes, campaigns, speeches, slogans. All of it is designed to make the public feel like they are looking at goodness. Actual goodness is almost incidental. Homelander is the center of that lie. At first, Homelander looks like the perfect superhero image: patriotic colors, clean on smile, impossible strength, calm voice, public confidence. But the more we see him privately, the clearer he becomes. He is not a protector. He is a child with godlike power, raised in a lab, starved of love, and trained to need applause more than anything else. He does not believe in people. He believes in being loved by them. That difference drives the whole show. Homelander is terrifying because he does not only want control, he wants worship. He wants the public to adore him while he stands above them. He wants to be feared and loved at the same time, which is why he is so unstable. Love means nothing to him if it is not submission. Respect means nothing to him if it is not fear. He performs humanity because the performance gets him what he wants. Season 1 slowly reveals the larger truth behind Vought. Soups are not born naturally, they are created through Compound V. Parents allowed their children to be injected, often without the children ever knowing. The whole superhero mythology is manufactured. Vought built gods and then sold them as miracles. That revelation is the key to the show's world. The heroes are not destiny, they are product. Their origin stories are branding campaigns. Their morality is market research. Their public identities are corporate assets. Even their pain can be monetized if Vought finds the right angle. The season also reveals Butcher's central wound. He believes Homelander raped his wife, Becca, and caused her disappearance. For years, Butcher has built his life around that loss. He hates Soups because of what Homelander did, but he also needs that hatred because without it, he has nothing left to organize himself around. The final twist is that Becca is alive, raising Homelander's son, Ryan. That changes everything. Butcher's revenge story was built on real pain, but the truth is more complicated than the version he has carried. Becca is not simply dead. Ryan exists. Homelander is not only a monster out there in the world, he is now a father, or at least trying to claim the role of one. Season 1 ends by showing that the fight is much bigger than exposing one bad superhero. Vought has created an entire reality where power, celebrity, politics, religion, and corporate money all protect each other. Huey entered the story because one person he loved was killed. By the end, he is looking at a machine built to make sure people like Robin never matter. Season 2 expands the story by showing how Vought survives scandal. The company does not stop lying when one lie is exposed. It simply replaces that lie with a new one. Stormfront enters as a new member of the Seven, and at first she looks like a modern, anti corporate, social media driven hero. She mocks the old Vought style. She understands memes, outrage, and direct connection with fans. She seems like the future. Then the show reveals that she is actually part of Vought's oldest evil. She is a Nazi, one of the first soups, and a living connection between superhero branding and fascist ideology. Stormfront is important because she shows that Vought's corruption is not only about money. It also has a political and historical root. The company's dream was always connected to power over human beings. Compound V was never just a product, it was a way to manufacture superiority. Her relationship with Homelander works because she gives him language for things he already feels. Homelander does not need to be taught that he is above ordinary people. He already believes that. Stormfront gives that belief a movement, a history, and an audience that can be organized through fear. Together, they show how easily celebrity worship can become political violence when the right story is attached to it. Season 2 also continues Butcher's struggle with Becca and Ryan. Becca wants to protect Ryan from Homelander and from the world of soups. Butcher wants Becca back, but he struggles with Ryan because Ryan is living proof of Homelander's presence in her life. This is where the show makes Butcher more complicated. He loves Becca, but his love is tangled with possession, rage, and his need for revenge. He wants to save her, but he does not always know how to love anything that interrupts his hatred. Ryan becomes one of the most important figures in the entire show because he is the question the series keeps asking in human form. If someone has terrible power, Does that mean they have to become terrible? Is Homelander the result of his powers, his upbringing, Vought, his own choices, or all of it together? Ryan is a child standing at that crossroads. Becca's whole purpose becomes keeping him human. The season ends with Stormfront defeated after Ryan uses his powers to protect his mother. But the blast also kills Becca. That moment traps Ryan inside the same kind of guilt that has shaped so many people in the show. He did not mean to kill her, but the damage is real. Butcher, in one of his rare moments of moral clarity, honors Becca's final wish and lets Ryan live under protection instead of turning him into an object of revenge. That matters because it shows there is still a line inside Butcher. He is brutal, hateful, and often cruel, but Becca can still pull him back towards something human. The problem is that once she is gone, that line becomes harder to hold. Season 2 is about the way hate can be modernized. Stormfront does not arrive wearing the past openly. She arrives with jokes, posts, fan engagement, and the ability to turn fear into identity. Vought adapts because power always adapts. It does not care what style it has to wear as long as the structure remains intact. Season 3 shifts the focus toward legacy and the danger of becoming what you claim to hate. Butcher and Huey begin using temporary compound V. This is one of the show's clearest moral turns. For years, Butcher has hated soups and everything they represent. Then he takes the drug because it gives him the power to fight them directly. Huey takes it too, partly because he wants to protect Annie, and partly because he is tired of feeling weak. That is the trap. They tell themselves the power is only a tool. But once they feel what it is like to be stronger than everyone around them, it begins changing how they see themselves. This is one of the show's strongest ideas. Power does not only reveal people, it tempts them into new versions of themselves. Huey is not evil when he takes Temp V, but he is ashamed of his helplessness, and the drug gives him a shortcut around that shame. Butcher is not shocked by violence, but Temp V gives him a way to turn his hatred into something more physically equal to Homelander. Both men use power to solve emotional wounds that power cannot actually heal. Soldier Boy returns as the major figure of the season. He is Vought's older model of heroism, rougher, more openly cruel, less polished than Homelander, but built from the same basic material. He represents the previous generation's version of the same sickness. The show does not present him as a noble old hero who has been misunderstood. He is abusive, arrogant, violent, and emotionally stunted. He is not an alternative to Homelander. He is one of the conditions that made Homelander possible. The reveal that Soldier Boy is Homelander's biological father is important because it turns the season into a story about inheritance. Homelander wants connection. Soldier Boy wants dominance. Butcher wants a weapon. Huey wants strength. Everyone is reaching for something through power, and every version of that reach makes them more dangerous. Black Noir's story also pays off here. For much of the show, he has been silent and strange, but season 3 reveals the trauma behind that silence. Soldier Boy brutalized him and left him broken. Noir is another body damaged by Vought's old hero system. His death at Homelander's hands is cruel because Homelander kills him for hiding the truth about Soldier Boy. Noir survived years of abuse only to be killed by the newer version of the same violence. Maeve's arc gives the season 1 of its stronger contrasts. She begins the series as cynical and defeated, someone who knows Vought is evil but has mostly surrendered to it. By season 3, she chooses action. Her final fight against Soldier Boy allows the others to survive, and she gets an exit from the superhero world. That matters because Maeve is one of the few characters who actually escapes the brand. She does not fix the world, but she gets out with part of herself intact. The season ends with Ryan choosing Homelander in public after Homelander kills a protester and the crowd cheers. That is one of the show's most important endings. Homelander has spent years terrified that the public will stop loving him if they see the real him. Then he discovers something worse. They may love him more when he stops hiding. That moment changes the show. Homelander realizes that accountability is weaker than worship. If his fans see murder and cheer anyway, then the mask is no longer necessary in the same way. He does not need to pretend to be good for everyone. He only needs enough people to believe his violence is proof of strength. Season 3 is about the seduction of power on both sides. Butcher and Huey become more like the thing they hate. Homelander becomes more openly himself. Soldier Boy proves the old heroic myth was already rotten. Ryan is pulled toward the worst possible teacher. The show is saying that power is not dangerous only because bad people have it. It is dangerous because even wounded, decent, or well meaning people start making excuses once power gives them what pain denied them. Season 4 turns the superhero problem into a political crisis. By this point, Homelander is no longer just Vought's most valuable asset. He is becoming the center of a movement. This is where the show becomes most directly about spectacle. The public is not only watching heroes anymore, they are choosing sides through them. Starlight becomes a symbol for one side. Homelander becomes a symbol for the other. Vought and its allies understand that politics no longer needs to persuade people calmly if it can keep them angry, frightened, and entertained. Sister Sage becomes important because she understands this better than almost anyone. She is not just physically powerful or publicly loved. Her power is strategy. She knows how to move people, how to feed conflict, and how to use chaos as a ladder. Homelander has force, but Sage understands systems. Their partnership shows how brute power becomes more dangerous when someone intelligent teaches it patience. Firecracker represents another part of the same machine. She is not powerful in the way Homelander is powerful, but she knows how to perform resentment. She knows how to turn lies into belonging. She gives people a story where their anger is righteous and their enemies are disgusting. That is exactly the kind of person Homelander's world needs. Not every weapon has to fly or shoot lasers. Some weapons just talk into a camera until violence starts to feel reasonable. Meanwhile, Butcher is dying because of his use of Temp V. His body is breaking down, and his mind is increasingly split by the figure of Joe Kessler. Kessler becomes the voice of Butcher's worst self, the part of him that does not want justice, does not want balance, and does not want to save Ryan so much as turn him into proof that Homelander can still lose. Butcher's illness makes literal what has been true emotionally for years. His hatred is killing him from the inside. The season keeps returning to Ryan because Ryan is still the possible future. Homelander wants to shape him into an heir. Butcher wants to save him, but also cannot stop seeing him through the lens of Becca and Homelander. Ryan is caught between two men who both claim to care about him and both project their own damage onto him. That is one of the show's clearest tragedies. Ryan does not need a mythology. He needs adults who will let him be a child, and almost nobody around him is capable of that for long. Victoria Newman's arc also becomes central. She is a politician, a soup, and a product of the same hidden Vought logic. Her power is secret, but her ambition is public. She represents the merger between superhero power and government power. By the end of season 4, the line between Vought and the state has almost disappeared. When Butcher kills Newman, it is framed as a turning point because he is no longer pretending to be restrained in the same way. He gives himself over to the monstrous solution. The political result is even worse. President elect Singer is removed from power, Calhoun rises, and Homelander gets what he wanted: state authority wrapped around superhero violence. The boys are captured. Starlight escapes. America enters Homelander's grip. Season 4 is about what happens when the mask comes off and the system does not collapse. It adjusts. Vought does not need to hide behind clean hero branding forever. Once the public has been trained to accept cruelty as strength, Homelander can become more open, more political, and more dangerous. The show is saying that propaganda works best when it does not only lie to people, but gives them permission to enjoy the lie. Season 5 brings the story to its final form. Homelander is no longer only threatening to take control. He has taken control. The superhero brand has become an authoritarian regime. Dissidents are hunted. Fear is official. Vought's logic has moved from entertainment into government. That is the endpoint the show had been building toward from the first episode. Robin's death began as a cover up. By the final season, the cover up has become the country. The same system that once tried to silence one grieving boyfriend now has the power to imprison whole groups of people. The scale changes, but the behavior is the same: protect the powerful, control the story, punish anyone who threatens the image. The boys regroup because there is no longer any middle ground. But the final conflict is not only about killing Homelander, it is also about whether Butcher can stop himself from turning the fight against Homelander into a war against every soup alive. That has always been Butcher's danger. He is right about Vought. He is right that Homelander is a monster. He is right that the official systems are compromised. But being right about the enemy does not make every method righteous. Butcher's hatred keeps expanding. It begins with Homelander, then spreads towards soups as a category. The virus gives him the final version of the thought he has been carrying for years: wipe them all out and call it justice. This is where Huey becomes essential. Huey began the show as the ordinary man pulled into the war because A-Train killed Robin. He had every reason to become like Butcher. He had grief, anger, humiliation, and enough exposure to Vought's evil to justify almost anything to himself. But Huey's importance is that he keeps resisting the full transformation. He fails often. He compromises. He takes Temp V. He lies. He gets people hurt. But he never fully lets go of the idea that the point is to remain human, not just to win. That is why the final conflict between Huey and Butcher matters as much as the conflict with Homelander. Homelander is the obvious monster. Butcher is the harder question. What do you do when the man fighting the monster becomes willing to commit his own version of mass murder? What happens when revenge borrows the language of justice so completely that even the person carrying it can barely tell the difference? Homelander's final defeat strips away his mythology. After years of presenting himself as untouchable, godlike, and above consequence, he is made powerless. That is the only ending that really fits him. His terror was always built on the gap between himself and everyone else. Once that gap closes, he becomes what he always was underneath the costume: frightened, desperate, hollow, and completely dependent on the power he mistook for identity. Butcher killing Homelander is the revenge he has wanted since the beginning. It is brutal, personal, and public. The world sees Homelander reduced to a body that can bleed and beg. The false god dies in front of the people who were taught to worship him. But the show does not end there, because Homelander was not the only problem. That is important. If the series ended with Homelander dead and everyone safe, it would betray its own logic. Homelander was the face of the sickness, not the whole sickness. Vought made him. The public worshipped him. Politics used him. Butcher needed him. Killing him resolves the central villain, but it does not automatically purify everyone who fought him. Butcher still tries to carry out the soup virus plan. That is the final proof that his war was never only about Homelander by the end. Huey has to stop him, and Butcher dies because someone finally refuses to let his pain become policy. Huey killing Butcher is tragic because there is love between them, but it is also necessary. Butcher could not stop himself. The man who spent the whole show warning Huey about monsters became one, and Huey's final act is to refuse him. Ryan surviving matters because he breaks the inheritance chain. Homelander wanted him as an heir. Butcher wanted him as Becca's redemption and sometimes as a weapon against Homelander. Ryan loses the burden of being a godchild and gets a chance to be raised outside both men's mythology. That is one of the show's rare, hopeful gestures. It does not erase what happened. It simply says that the next generation does not have to belong completely to the damage it came from. Annie and Huey's ending also matters because it brings the show back to ordinary life without pretending ordinary life is small. Huey began as a man working in an electronics store, grieving a woman killed by a superhero. By the end, he and Annie build a quieter life, still aware of the world's danger, but no longer defined only by revenge. Their unborn child being named Robin brings the story full circle. Robin's death started Huey's journey. Her name survives not as a reason to keep killing, but as a reason to keep living. Kimiko leaving for Marseille after Frenchie's death gives her arc a different kind of ending. She spent the show being treated as a weapon, a test subject, a killer, and a damaged person who needed someone else to translate her pain. Her final movement is toward a life chosen for herself. The same is true in a different way for Mother's Milk, who survives long enough to choose family and responsibility over endless war. The Deep's ending is less emotionally central, but it fits the show's moral pattern. He spent years avoiding accountability through status, self pity, and absurd reinvention. He wanted to be seen as a victim of every system he willingly served. His death closes off one of the show's smaller but consistent ideas. Pathetic men can still do real harm when institutions keep protecting them. The ending of The Boys is not saying the world is fixed. Vought can change leadership. Spin offs can continue. The culture that created Homelander does not vanish because Homelander dies, but the main story ends by separating justice from revenge. Homelander has to die because his power is too dangerous and his crimes are too great. But Butcher also has to be stopped because pain does not become moral just because it points at the right enemy. So the full story of The Boys is the story of a world where power becomes a product, and then the product becomes a regime. A train killing Robin shows what happens when powerful people can destroy ordinary lives and treat the aftermath as paperwork. Starlight joining the Seven shows what happens when a sincere person enters a fake institution and realizes goodness has been reduced to branding. Homelander shows what happens when a child is raised as a weapon, sold as a savior, and worshipped until he mistakes applause for love. Butcher shows what happens when grief becomes the only thing keeping a person alive. Huey shows what it costs to stay human while fighting something inhuman. Ryan shows the possibility of breaking the cycle before it hardens. The show was trying to tell us that corruption does not always look hidden. Sometimes it stands on a stage, smiles, gives a speech, and receives applause. Sometimes everyone knows the system is rotten, but they keep participating because the rotten system gives them comfort, enemies, entertainment, or identity. That is why Vought is so important. Vought is not just a company in the story, it is the machine that turns everything into something sellable. Heroism becomes merchandise. Feminism becomes a campaign. Patriotism becomes a costume. Trauma becomes a press release. Religion becomes a market. Rebellion itself can be turned into content if the company finds a way to own the image. The Boys is at its best when it shows that the public is not merely tricked. People are manipulated, yes, but they also choose what they want to believe. Homelander succeeds because he gives some people permission to stop pretending to be decent. Stormfront succeeds because she wraps old hatred in modern language. Firecracker succeeds because resentment is easier to sell than responsibility. Vought succeeds because it understands that people do not only want truth, they want a story that makes their anger feel clean. The tragedy of the show is that almost everyone is trapped inside performance. The heroes perform goodness, the company performs responsibility, politicians perform concern, fans perform loyalty, even Butcher performs righteousness, so he does not have to look too closely at revenge. Annie's power as a character comes from her refusal to stay only a performance. She begins as Starlight, the brand, but survives by becoming Annie, the person underneath it. That is the real difference between Homelander and the people who survive him. Homelander has nothing underneath the image except need. Butcher has something underneath, but he lets hatred eat most of it. Huey, Annie, MM, Kimiko, and the others survive by holding on to some piece of ordinary humanity. Not innocence. They lose that early. Humanity. The show is not naive about that. It does not say love fixes everything. Becca loves Ryan and still dies. Huey loves Robin and cannot save her. Frenchie and Kimiko love each other and still lose time they cannot get back. But love matters because it gives some characters a reason not to become pure weapons. It gives them a line to return to when the war tries to turn them into what they hate. That is the final message of The Boys. Power without humanity becomes performance first, then violence. Anger without limits becomes revenge first, then extermination. Institutions without accountability become brands first, then regimes. And people who want to fight any of that have to be careful, because the easiest way to fight a monster is to become useful to the same logic that made him. The Boys begins with Huey holding what is left of Robin in the street. It ends with him choosing life after years of being pulled toward revenge. That is the movement of the whole show. It starts with the damage power does to ordinary people, then asks whether those ordinary people can fight back without letting damage become their entire soul. Homelander dies because a world like that cannot be allowed to keep him as its god. Butcher dies because killing the god was not enough for him. Huey survives because he finally understands the difference. The show's clearest answer is not that superheroes are bad. That is too small. The answer is that power becomes monstrous when nobody can tell it no, and resistance becomes monstrous when it forgets what it is trying to protect.